from wherever you are watching this from. My name is Mbuta Masogu, and I'm the IPE Communications Officer. And welcome and thank you for joining us in this webinar where we continue to discuss issues to do with epilepsy in Africa and the world over in general. So today, before we begin, maybe we have apologies from our Vice President, Mr. Action Amos, and the Vice Chairperson, Mr. Yusuf, as they have another meeting that's going on with this one. So today we'll be discussing issues that are facing the youth in Africa, especially, when you talk in relation to epilepsy. So we have three speakers today. We have Reverend Fred from Kenya, Jesse from Zambia, and Lacey from Eswatini. So maybe just to before we begin, this was it's an open discussion. Everyone is welcome to share ideas or contribute whichever way they can. As we're trying to understand how we can include and involve the youth. So maybe you can share your own stories from your own countries of how you you work with the youth with epilepsy or without epilepsy, or the youth in general. So as we begin, maybe Fred, you can take over from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Buto, and everyone for joining. Buto, maybe you can confirm if my voice can be heard.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. I'll just turn on my camera so that you can see my face, and then I'll turn it off to straight go into our presentation for the day. Yeah, so my name is Reverend Frederick Beuchi. I serve with the Methodist Church in Kenya as a chaplain. At the moment, I'm also the National Secretary of the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee, Kenya. I'm an epilepsy awareness activist as well. And I really want to thank IBE Africa region for giving me an opportunity to share on this, on today's topic. So I believe we are going to have a moment to learn together and even have more contributions, even also from the participants. Thank you. Well, this afternoon, even as we reflect on our main theme, that is making epilepsy a health priority in Kenya, we are narrowing down into focusing on promoting inclusion of youth with epilepsy. And when we talk about inclusion, we are looking at so many areas, but I have just broken it down into looking at employment. And that's why we have this topic as bridging the unemployment gap for youths with epilepsy. Next slide, Mbuto. So while we reflect on bridging the unemployment gap for youth with epilepsy, allow me to just share these two case study stories. And these stories actually are the two people, Zipporah and Simon, young people in Kenya living with epilepsy. I've had an opportunity to interact with them. Actually, for the two of them, I picked up their cases when they were laid off work from the companies that they were working, just because at some point they experienced an attack while they were working. And from there, things really changed, and the companies were not ready to let them back to work. So Zipporah is professionally is a banker, 28 years of age, and was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 20. She has been excelling in her banking career until epilepsy struck and experienced a number of seizures attacks while on duty. And she was advised to take a break on paid leave for 2 months. But by the time she came back, her position had been taken up by another person. She has been on job hunting since without success. And the story is not different for Simon. Simon is a casual laborer, and at some point he got a job with the town municipality to do cleaning, and he really loved his work and he was really dedicated. So at the age of 20 years old, she was diagnosed with epilepsy at on a little bit early, and so his seizures were controlled. Only that at some point when he was triggered, then he would probably get a seizure. And one day this happened, and his employer didn't think twice about really keeping him. He was fired, and his efforts to look for a job have not bore any fruit. And last year, he decided to start a grocery business, which has so far picked so well. And now he's employed. So looking at these two stories, actually, I've just sampled a few, but personally being in the position of the National Secretary for the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee in Kenya, I have a record of a number of people who constantly call me every day. They are persons living with epilepsy, and they are of age of getting opportunities to work. Some of them have, gone ahead and study different professions, and they are qualified, but it has been very difficult for them to get opportunities to be employed. And every time they call is about, is there an organization where I can get a job? Is there a place where they can accept me? And stuff like that. And so their story is not different from Zipporah and Simon. Next slide, Buto. And so we look at the challenge really. So what has really created the gap between youths who have actively taken up the journey of medication? Their seizures are well controlled, and so it means in whatever kind of profession that they have studied, given an opportunity, they can really work, but that is still not forthcoming. Some of the challenges that really came out looking at the story of Zipporah and Simon is that there was a lack of understanding. And for Zipporah, one of the biggest barriers to employment was lack of understanding of epilepsy. And this was arising from the employers and even the fellow employees and colleagues where she was working. So many employers were unaware of different ways that epilepsy can affect people, assuming everyone with epilepsy, for example, has a tonic-clonic seizure, and were unaware many seizures can be controlled with medication. So I remember after Zipporah had taken a break and she went back to her workplace alone, only to be told that her position has been picked up, has been given to another person. She came back and she shared the story. I had to go with her to this particular bank, and I requested to meet the CEO, and we were given audience with the CEO. And after I really explained and shared with the CEO on the need of taking Zipporah back to work, actually, the CEO was concerned And he even apologized and say, I think the action they took was from a point of really not understanding that epilepsy can really be controlled with medication. It was only that, from his position, he could not.
The X again. I told you.
Sorry, he could not really make a decision of
Good
allowing.
afternoon, Phoenix. Contact is great.
He could not really give a go ahead for Zipporah to be allowed back to work, because that was a decision of the board, and it was going to be, a very long process. But our going there to help him understand and also help the other, colleague workers understand necessitated an opportunity for us to even have a one-day training seminar, so that we could just share the basics of what epilepsy is, what causes epilepsy, first aid, and things like that. And so even though Zipporah didn't get an opportunity to go back to, his working station, but we left an impact there with people who I want to believe right now have a better understanding of what epilepsy is all about, and also considering people living with epilepsy for such job opportunities. The other challenge was looking for work. And in one of the opportunities, in the case of Simon, got to be invited for an interview, and he experienced a seizure during the interview, and he was rejected for the job. This is a whole other thing, because we have a lot of young people who, are under medication and their seizures are controlled. But we all know that even when somebody is taking their medication and there are some kind of triggers, they can still experience seizures. And sometimes you can't really control that. If you have been asked to go for an interview, even a person who doesn't really have epilepsy, I have gone for, job interviews a couple of times, and there's always that anxiety, of not knowing what to really expect, and sitting before all these people asking questions here and there. And I want to believe maybe that's exactly what perhaps happened to Simon. And because of that, feeling so anxious during the interview, a seizure happened. It wasn't a major one, but he came back to his normal self and proceeded on with the interview until it was all done. But because it had happened in between the interview, then that was a reason enough for this people to not give you an opportunity to work here. And so young people living with epilepsy is not that they are not looking for jobs or they are not looking for work. They are out there knocking doors, looking at opportunities, and they are ready to, go forth and defend and show their proficiency in the work that they have actually studied for. But the challenge comes in again, when you finally get that opportunity, you are invited for that, and then the opposite happens. And the reluctance to make adjustments to allow persons with epilepsy fit in the workplace, when it comes to looking for that job or that work, again, it's a challenge. We really wish that the employers would have, be open enough. If something like that happens in an interview, then, they have an opportunity to make adjustments where people can actually, come back to themselves, explain exactly what happened, and see that they have the capability of continuing with that work with their seizures control. The other challenge is the support at work. And for both of them, Simon and Zipporah, colleagues and bosses at work, were likely not to understand and extend the extent of the condition, despite being aware of one's epilepsy status. So we actually, for many employers, lack that support at work. I mean, once you have qualified, you have been in the interview, they have even made adjustments of accommodating you in that environment, you will find out that, that support is not coming out very well. Because everyone wants to approach you with the mindset of this person has a condition, and so he is limited to be doing this, other than looking at what you are capable of doing. So one ends up not really getting the support fully from their bosses and also from the colleagues. And that contributes now into really being a challenge. Next slide, Luto. Yeah, so even as we reflect on the challenges, which I have just highlighted a few, but there are so many, that have been a barrier and a hindrance to youth with epilepsy getting, job opportunities. We want to look at then what can we do? What can be done so that, that gap that has been created by those challenges can actually be narrowed down. And it all goes back to the employers. And this is what we are saying, that employers must or should undertake epilepsy-specific training to better understand the condition. And just like when I took Zipporah back to, her workplace, and though she was not able to be taken back, but they gave us an opportunity to give a training to the bosses and even to the colleagues. I want to believe that left a mark of a difference. So any other time when they get a person and they give them an opportunity to work and they realize maybe they have epilepsy or any other condition, they will be able to, make the environment friendly to accommodate such a person, and overlook the challenge and see what exactly they can be able to deliver, because these people are qualified. And the other thing is offering better employment support for people with epilepsy, including personalized toolkit for employees and employers to promote positive disclosure and active self management. So this is also key, like offering better employment support for people with epilepsy, including personalized toolkit for employees and employers to promote positive disclosure. Again, it all revolves around creating a friendly working environment where a person would really feel will not fear saying that, yes, I'm qualified in this career or profession, but I also have epilepsy. The other challenge I've really seen is that so many young people, because of the fear of, if I come out and I say I have epilepsy, irrespective of my qualifications that I have, I will automatically be locked out. And if a person presents themselves and the working environment in the company is welcoming, then they will not fear from disclosing and say, yes, I am a qualified lawyer, I'm a qualified doctor, I'm a qualified waiter and stuff like that, but I have this condition. They will not shy or fear from mentioning, because already the environment around there, is friendly, and they know that they will not be judged from that. The government also has a role to play, and even as we get into the next slide, Mbuto, I think it should be the second last. We are trying to look at how then we can link up that inclusion of young people with the IGAP. We all know that at this point in time in the epilepsy work, we are really trying to see how we can implement the IGAP and its objectives, the strategic objectives. And while I was looking at it, even as we point out that the government also has a role to play, in the IGAP strategic objective 1, it talks about raising policy prioritization finance. The government has a bigger role to play, because when it comes to policies that are going to be taken up by employers and companies to create those friendly environment for these young people to feel that they are not segregated or discriminated against getting opportunities in such companies or institutions or organizations to work, then it's really going to help. And to just be specific, the global target under the strategic objective 1 on the IGAP, 100% of countries will have at least one functioning awareness campaign or advocacy program, for neurological disorders by 2031. This is very important, because once policies have been developed, then they can be narrowed down to, it will not be a question of a person opting to go to a company to raise awareness, but it will be embedded now even in the laws, that companies, when it comes to laws that are governing or are serving the interest of persons with epilepsy, then the training for these companies will be mandatory. It will not be a question of whether it should be done or not be done. And we all agree that there is a big gap when it comes to awareness and advocacy, not only in our communities, but more so also in these companies and organizations where young people with epilepsy are looking for opportunities to be given work. And in my conclusion, so even as we reflect on the strategic objective there and the global target for the IGAP in Kenya, there is an establishment of the Federation of Kenya Employers, really, whose mandate is to promote enabling business environment through labor and social policy advocacy and capacity building, which in this case, I think this is the step that we are talking about, 100% of countries embracing policies, that will establish, such societies or federations that will look into the specific interests of, giving young challenge and conditions of employment and an enabling business environment where they will not feel discriminated. And this has been strengthened even much more with our constitution here in Kenya, the 2010 Constitution, which provides persons with disability. We all know that, you know, epilepsy is also considered as a disability. So in our Constitution, the 2010 provides persons with disability in Article 27(3) of the Constitution guarantees equal treatment, including the right to equal opportunities in political, economic, cultural, and social spheres. And it goes ahead to mention in Article 27(4) and 5, prohibits discrimination on any ground inter disability. And this includes discrimination in employment and labor relations. So we are not very far when it comes to implementing the strategic objectives and goals for IGAP, even as we talk about, you know, inclusion and narrowing down the gap of unemployment for the youth living with epilepsy. The challenge again for such laws which have been embedded in our constitutions is that implementation sometimes take longer before it is realized. But we want to believe, as you know, the African countries, if we are geared towards, you know, realizing the difference and giving young people living with epilepsy opportunities, then on the side of policy, that is what we should push for, and make sure that, you know, societies, organizations are formed which can now really push the agenda of making sure that any law that has been enacted and it is protecting persons with disability, those with epilepsy included, are implemented. And we will not have that challenge of seeing a lot of young people who are unemployed, yet they are qualified. The last slide, Buto. And so, so for the government, once, you know, these laws that are there in our constitutions, you know, have people are starting now to embrace and putting them into implementation. Some of it is like introducing mandatory disability employment and pay gap reporting, including reporting on the employment gap for specific groups, measures to ascertain with disability as staying in work, you know, can be important as finding that employment. So introduction of such mandatory disability employment and pay gap reporting for employers will help us in trying to have a measure of understanding who are these young people who have qualified yet they have not been given such opportunities. Who are these young people from these specific special groups that have qualified yet they don't have an opportunity in the workspace. And number two, employers to produce action plans identifying the steps they will take to address any gaps identified in the implementation of, you know, the mandatory disability employment and pay gap reporting. Employers to be deliberate in producing action plans that will identify the steps they will take to address any gaps identified when it comes to these special groups, when it comes to young people or the youth with epilepsy who are qualified and you know, they are ready to work. And the other thing is to ensure you know, job coaches are trained and understand epilepsy and the employment barriers they face. By the time somebody has been accepted into being given an opportunity to work, then in that working environment, are there people who can orient them? Are there people who, can be there to explain things out and even do the training without necessarily getting outside people to come there? Maybe that will be something that will also help in narrowing down the gap of unemployment for youth with epilepsy. And last but not least, strengthen statutory guidance for employers to encourage early intervention to support a sick employee to return to work. If this was one of the things that perhaps would have been considered by the time Zipporah had lost her job, there would be somebody, or there would have been guidance offered on how will Zipporah be taken back to work after that period of being laid off or being given an opportunity to recover. I want to believe she wouldn't have missed her position by the time she came back. But again, they are the same things that we might not really be implementing now, and that's why they posed the challenge of her missing out that job opportunity. Finally, extend the full range of statutory employment rights to all workers, regardless of employment status or type of contract. This is a whole other thing again. Getting that job is one thing, and to be retained for some time doing what somebody really loves or what they have worked for is a whole another thing. Even the contracts that are being developed, by the time they feel like they will need you for some time before they get tired with you. Maybe these are the things that should really be taken into consideration when it comes to somebody getting the full range of employment rights to all workers, regardless of the employment status or the type of contract that has been laid out. Thank you so much for that. I want to believe if such is embraced, then we will have an opportunity to really narrow down the unemployment gap between young people or youth with epilepsy. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Maybe before we continue, we can have one or two comments from the members who have joined us for the meeting. Because I, for one, can attest to what Fred was talking about, working with the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization in the country. We have seen these employment issues happen to young people. And I'm sure we've written about 3 letters so far this year, asking employers to be considerate of the fact that these people live with epilepsy, and that we are supporting them, helping them in terms of managing their condition with either counseling or medication-wise. So this is a very common issue in the country as well. And thank you for that, Fred. So maybe if we have someone who also wants to add something or ask a question to Fred, this is the opportunity before we move on to Jesse from Zambia. Oh,
Buto, I think I will be present for the whole session, so maybe we can keep questions at the end so that we give an opportunity for the next speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred. Jesse Nyirenda from Zambia. Maybe we can hand over to you so you make your presentation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Buto. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse Nyirenda, and I'll be sharing the next presentation. I'll just turn off my camera because I have a poor internet connectivity. I hope you don't mind, but I'll start sharing the screen. Mbuto, kindly advise if the screen is visible.
Yes, your screen has been shared.
Okay. Okay, so for me, my main topic of discussion is looking at breaking the taboo and conquering self-stigma. So this is an experience that I encountered, and I'll just run you through it. So my name is Jessie Pelile Nirenda. I am a mother of 3, and I've been living with epilepsy since 1994. As you can see, I love the outdoors. On the picture there, that's me. I love cooking, I love public speaking, and I also love traveling. These, as you may be well aware, are not really associated with people living with epilepsy, especially in our community, because we're supposed to be confined. So they would have been denied to me had I succumbed to cultural norms. Also, the photo next to me, this is my son, who is soon to be 15 in July. He loves art, he loves basketball, and he loves debate. He loves all sorts of outdoor activities. And for him, he knows that the world is his oyster and there are no limitations. So this has been our journey so far. In 1994, when I was 14, just a young adolescent, I had my first seizure, and nobody actually knew what was happening, because from what we knew as epilepsy, it was where somebody falls down and loses consciousness and has the convulsions. But for me, I was fully conscious, but was just unable to control my upper part of the body. This is the limbs, my hands. So I was just having persistent jerks. So between 1995 and 2000, it was a very confusing period for me. My mother, in all her efforts, took me to both conventional and non-conventional doctors. And their diagnosis ranged from some doctors just claiming that I was being an attention seeker, being a last-born and throwing tantrums, to, from the non-conventional aspect, the traditional leaders were saying that paternal relatives had perhaps bewitched me and so on. Then also the religious, their role came in, and they were saying that perhaps that I was demon possessed and all sorts of things. So it wasn't really a good period for me. But during this period, I did some research and asked a lot of questions, and I found myself in the hands of Zambia, the Epilepsy Association of Zambia, where I joined the association. And through them, I was able to receive lots of counseling, and my journey to breaking the barriers had started. In 2019, after now I was much older and I had started my own family, my young son, who at the time was 11 years old, had his first seizure. And for me, when I saw him, he has a similar type of epilepsy as myself. I immediately knew what it was and wasted no time, took him to a specialist, and he was given the necessary treatment. I also involve him in activities with the Epilepsy Association of Zambia, where he is able to express himself and knows that epilepsy is just a disorder. So now I'll tell you a different scenario. There's a young lady known as Milesy. Milesy is the daughter of my employee. In 2011, she started having seizures at the age of 8. And with them, I think the journey was somewhat similar to what I had, where they were taken to religious places and traditional healers. With her, from 2012 to 2020, they did not attempt to take her to conventional medical practitioners. Only until 2019, when the mother started working for me, and I encouraged them to see a professional medical practitioner, and she started receiving medication. As we all know, with the medication for anti-seizures, they have to be taken consistently. And this wasn't the case. And in 2021, the mother saw it fit that she should move Milesi to the village to seek traditional medication. So she no longer takes her conventional medication. Milesi is depressed. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. And she has not been seeking any mental health treatment in form of counseling. Milesi feels so ashamed to be associated with anyone and is going through self-blame and is self-isolating. 2 families, 1 ailment, different journeys. So we all experienced the taboos. When we speak of taboos in African society, I'm sure you are well aware that people with epilepsy may be more oftentimes viewed as contagious, insane, possessed by demons, or cursed by deities or witches. When we go to a society, as the previous speaker had mentioned, we're deemed to be unemployable. We're not suitable for marriage, and also religious beliefs state that we are demon possessed. All these things contribute to what I'm going to focus on, which is self-stigma. Self-stigma is something that, in a situation where the person living with the ailment accepts the attitudes and norms of society, or in some cases of medical community. Self-stigma is rarely discussed and can lead to hopelessness and helplessness. So I've just outlined here a few pointers of the effects of self-stigma. We've seen that it leads to low self-esteem, isolation, feeling devalued, social rejection, and shame. Constantly, we ask ourselves the questions. They won't accept me if I tell them about my ailment. Why is this happening to me? And for me, this question tormented me during the period when we didn't know what it was. And my mother asked me, she said, if it's not happening to you, point at a person whom you'd like it to happen to. If you cannot point at that person for whom it can happen to, then you need to change your way of thinking. But alas, even if she told me at that time as a young person, I would just look at people around me and think, they are laughing at me. I am not good enough. And in me trying to be good enough for other people, I started joining into social norms where if I wanted to fit in, then I had to drink and smoke. We all know that once you start drinking, this leads to triggers and seizures, and then the cycle continued for me. So for me at that time, at my formation stage, it was really difficult for me to go through all these things. But one thing that has came out from me is that self-stigma can be learned, and it also can be unlearned. How self-stigma started being unlearned for me is through my interaction with the Epilepsy Association of Zambia. Through my interactions with the association, I found that there were people who understood what it is that I was going through, and that I cannot control what the next person is thinking or saying. What I can control is what is within me. And I started looking at now dismantling low self-esteem. I started looking at how I can socialize, come out of isolation in a safe way. Feeling devalued, I looked at the time I was still in school, my results. I was a straight A student. I used to play sport. I would do 400 meters relay and we would win. So my value started appreciating. And because I accepted myself, I broke this barrier of social rejection. And with it went away the shame. I became very proud of myself. So this was my experience as a youth. So now we look at Milesi. Why has Milesi actually struggled to overcome this self-stigma? Unfortunately, Milesi has succumbed to the norms of society, and she believes what she is told. Milesi believes that she is demon-possessed. She believes that she will not amount to anything in life and is no value to anyone. Because who would want to marry somebody who is demon-possessed? When she goes to school, she believes that she cannot pursue her education. Despite Milesi having passed her grade 7 exams into grade 8, she withdrew from school until the demon is cast out. That's when she says she will go back to school. Speaking to Milesi, asking her what she would want to be when she grows up, Milesi dares not to dream because she feels that her future is bleak. And with all this, Milesi is not part of a social support system from organizations like the Epilepsy Association of Zambia. In as much as their efforts are there within most districts, in the rural areas, their outreach is constrained by many factors. So unfortunately, Milesi is surrounded by people who believe that she is demon-possessed and do not value her. So now looking at my case and my son, we seem to have broken this taboo. And what is it that we took advantage of to break these barriers? One of the first things that I looked at was the family support. When I was growing up, I absolutely refused to believe that I had been bewitched, because I know that my father's family love me because I am their daughter and they would wish no harm to come on me. Looking at the religious community, I was very headstrong and I counter-argued with them. That how is it possible that a demon may dwell in me when I had received the sacrament of baptism? So I ruled out all this business of me being demon-possessed, which took me to the next step. And for me, knowledge is power. From a young age, I started researching until I found the solution. Apparently, carbamazepine at the time was my golden pill, because with this drug, despite its side effects, my seizures were manageable. The additional knowledge that I got was from the Epilepsy Association of Zambia. We spoke about things like auras. I had no idea what an aura was. It's possible for me to tell the signs that a seizure is coming on, and I was able to control myself and confine myself. Secondly, they told me to speak out and speak up. Every person who was within my circle, or who is within my circle, is fully aware that I am living with epilepsy. Should I have a seizure, how they should help me. So this mental health treatment of accepting this, what I can call just a mental disorder, a mental health disorder, a neurological challenge that I had, helped me to overcome so many barriers, which transcended even up to today in my work life. This mentoring and support that I received, I did not keep it to myself. I shared this with every person who I was aware of as living with epilepsy or having a family member with epilepsy. The first few steps that I went through, I'm blessed and fortunate enough to say that my son did not go through that, because from the time that we noticed his seizures, we were able to talk to him about it and involve him in the Epilepsy Association of Zambia. This brings me to the main issue of mindset. The biggest mindset that the youth needs to have is that they move away from why is this happening to me to what is this trying to teach me. Once this mindset has been changed, the barriers will be broken, the taboos will be broken, in self-stigmatization. So I came out in the open in 2020 through social media. This is just some of the articles that I shared. I called it the misfiring of one's nervous system. I'm sure you cannot read the entire article, but I told my story of how my first seizure happened, when it happened, and what activities transpired, and my life today. It also has a key message, what to do when a person has seizures. As you can see from the emojis, I used humor because I feel that once I accept it and I see the humorous side of the activities to it, everybody will stop pitying me and realize that just as people who are HIV positive may take ARVs, people who have diabetes may take insulin, even people who are living with epilepsy may take the available drugs that are there. This was the beginning of how I have been engaging my son, talking to youth, because now youth are able to see that, okay, this woman has come out in the open and has no shame. And they too have been coming out up to me, asking what steps they can take in order for them to be public about it and explain to people. And also in order for them to accept themselves as they are, overcome whatever personal boundaries that they may have had. That video, ladies and gentlemen, was just one of the clips that I share on social media. It's there to attract the youth, to say that epilepsy does not define you. When I was in my professional working career, I reached the level of chief operations officer. There were times when I would have seizures, but everybody knew how to treat me. That was not a barrier. And every youth can actually visualize, they can actually dream to be the topmost in an institution. These are also other messages that I have been sharing. I believe that breaking the barrier starts by speaking openly about epilepsy, putting a face to epilepsy. And one other thing that I also bring out is living with epilepsy is like living with an invisible stalker. Dealing with depression and mental health care is of primary importance. This journey I have taken has not been smooth sailing at all. I have had to have professional psychological treatment for depression. But what I'm happy to say is that the taboo has been broken. I have overcome self-stigma and my insecurities, and I am a conqueror. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jesse, for that touching presentation, sharing your personal story growing up with epilepsy from your country. I mean, you brought another element that maybe some of us had not paid attention to, the self-inflicted stigma that when you're living with epilepsy, you face on a daily. We'll have, after this, a moment for other maybe members to share also the stories if they have, or comment or ask you questions later. So maybe we can also move on to Sengetile Masugu, who will be presenting the case of Eswatini. Thank you. Over to you, Sengetile.
Thank you, Mr. Masugu, and everyone for joining this webinar. Mr. Masugu, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. You can continue.
Okay. I will turn on my video for a few minutes, then I'll display the presentation thereafter. Thank you. Greetings to everyone present. My name is Sengetile Letsimasugu, a representative of the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization and a global youth ambassador of Their World, a cohort of young people from around the world aged 18 to 20, all committed to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Goal Development Number 4 of inclusive and equitable quality education for all. And I am very honored to get this opportunity to be part of this webinar. I will be presenting on the participation of youth with epilepsy in the case of the Kingdom of Eswatini. The outline of my presentation will mainly focus on 3 strategic areas, namely the importance of inclusion, equity, and diversity, the importance of youth with epilepsy's participation, and strategies enforced by the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization to promote more youth inclusion. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugo. Firstly, can we define youth participation? Youth participation entails actively involving young people in decision-making processes on issues that affect them, mainly issues surrounding stigma, discrimination, and lack of employment that is very prevalent among youth with epilepsy and the youth at large. Society mainly views the young generation as part of the problem. Thus, it is high time society start cultivating young people's potential and including them in the decision-making processes. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. We will now focus on the importance of youth inclusion, equity, and diversity. Youth inclusion, equity, and diversity is an ethos that recognizes the value of diverse voices and centers inclusivity by reducing the history of injustice that has been seen in marginalized, underrepresented society like the youth with epilepsy. The image that is illustrated serves as a roadmap that will clearly define why the promotion of inclusion matters. We'll first look at the first image. The first image illustrates the reality that we live in, that society doesn't prioritize people with different needs. It views every individual in the same light and places emphasis that everybody needs to find their own way without any assistance. In this image illustrated, we see that the main goal is for everybody to watch the baseball match, but due to individual limitation, we see the young man who in this instance we will say is a young man with epilepsy who isn't able to watch the match due to his condition. The second illustration gives light on the paradigm shift that gave birth to equality, meaning each individual is given the same resources or opportunities to reach an equal outcome. In this illustration, we see that the individuals are all given the same elevators as means to enable them the opportunity to be able to watch the game. But it still doesn't solve the main problem, as the young man with epilepsy still couldn't watch the game even with the elevator provided. Image 3 then provides a clear description by which that was done by society to try and curb the problems observed due to equality. We then introduced equity. Equity mainly recognizes that each person has different circumstances and there is need to allocate the exact resources and opportunities needed for them to reach an equal outcome. It mainly focuses on meeting individuals at their point of need in order for them to be more productive. In this illustration, we can observe that each individual was given the necessary resources they needed so that they can be able to watch the match as means to promote equity. We now see the young man with epilepsy being given 2 elevators that enabled him to watch the match. The last image proves that even with equity functioning well, the main barrier being the wall was still a restriction. Thus, society introduced inclusion, whereby we foster an environment where everybody feels a sense of belonging by removing the barrier against inclusion. For instance, in this illustration, it is the brick wall. Inclusion's main goal is to provide equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded and marginalized, such as youth with epilepsy, minority groups, to name a few. In this illustration, we observe that by removing the brick wall, it created an aura and made everybody feel welcome and was able to watch the game and enjoy it. In summary of this illustration echoes on how pivotal and important the promotion of inclusion is to youth at large, youth with epilepsy, as it fosters an environment that did not deny the impact of an individual's impairment, but seek to view a person with disability as an individual and not label them on their disability. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. We will now explore the importance of inclusion, equity, and diversity to the youth at large before we reach our target population, which is youth with epilepsy. Firstly, it is for a provision of a broader perspective. Inclusiveness of individuals from different ethnicities, races, and disabilities bring a unique framework and enable innovative ways to approach various problems society may face. It also gives an opportunity for all. It encourages a more positive working environment. It is also a means to gain a more global appeal. The world and organizations are embracing diversity in their policies and structures as means to keep up with the fast-moving global trends. Organizations have to be more inclusive to gain more global partnerships and networks. Lastly, it celebrates diversity and acknowledges differences as we are all wired different. Next slide, Mr. Masugu. We will now explore the importance of youth with epilepsy's participation and be specific to our target population, which is the youth with epilepsy. Firstly, it fosters a sense of belonging and independence. By creating a community of youth with epilepsy where they can come and share ideas and feel at home without fear of being judged. Secondly, to increase a better health outcome for youth with epilepsy. To increase youth with epilepsy self-esteem and reduce emphasis on disability, so the world may view them as an individual and not focus on that disability. Lastly, to promote more youth with epilepsy to actively take part in any activity without fear or limitation. I want us to foster an environment where we encourage representation and encourage youth with epilepsy to take up space in society and cement themselves, because nothing in the society is as important as taking up space and cementing yourself. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. Before we move on how Eswatini Epilepsy Organization promotes youth involvement, can we please look at the epilepsy statistics for the year of 2017 to 2021? In this graphic presentation, it entails the number of persons with epilepsy that came to healthcare facilities to seek assistance for the year 2017 to the year 2021. We see that there was a drastic increase in the number of persons with epilepsy coming to seek assistance from the year 2018 to 2019. Majority of these patients were referred to the healthcare facilities by the organization through the advocacy and awareness campaign held in various communities. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. Mr. Masugu. Thank you. The second graphic presentation outlines the number of epilepsy cases reported disaggregated by sex. In this graphic presentation, we observe that there were more males than females that reported to healthcare facilities to seek assistance between the year 2017 and 2021. Thank you. The third graphic presentation focuses on the number of epilepsy cases disaggregated by age. We observe from this graph that there was an increase in the number of persons with epilepsy seeking assistance in their local clinics from the age ranges of 20 to 29. However, we also notice that the number recorded when compared to other age ranges presented show that there was less youth with epilepsy coming forward as 42% of the Eswatini population is the youth. So it is expected that there would have been a slight increase in the number of youth with epilepsy cases recorded for the year 2017 and 2021. Having seen this decrease, we saw the need for the promotion of more youth inclusion with epilepsy in the organization. The organization then developed various activities to promote youth participation with epilepsy in Eswatini. Oh, next slide, Mr. Masugu. Apologies. We are on the Sorry, Mr. Masugu, please go up. No, go up. Yes, we are there. We are the next slide, Mr. Masugu. Okay, sorry for that. These are the strategies enforced by the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization to promote more youth participation with epilepsy in the kingdom. When it comes to youth inclusion, the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization categorized the youth into two main areas of focus, namely the secondary target group being the primary caregivers who fall under the category of being called youth, and the general youth at large of the Kingdom of Eswatini. Secondly, we have the primary targeted group being the youth with epilepsy, which is our main area of focus. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. One of the strategies used by Eswatini Epilepsy Organization to promote more youth inclusion is providing financial support for self-sustaining projects. The organization assists in small business development, mainly rearing of poultry, farming, and handicraft. We provide the youth with epilepsy the materials they need and also assist them in getting a market for their products. These are means done by the organization to develop youth with epilepsy entrepreneurial skill and foster a sense of financial independence so that youth with epilepsy can move from being dependent to being more independent and promote inclusion of youth with epilepsy in various sectors. An example illustrated on the image below is that of the boy who is now incapable. Sorry, Mr. Masugu, we're still on that slide. We're still on, yes. Who is now incapable of doing anything for himself due to his physical disability caused by epilepsy. The mother was then given startup capital to start a handicraft project in Baban as means to help sustain them. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. Secondly, the organization also includes the youth through sports like the Eswatini Golf Tournament, Marathon, and cycling. The youth are mainly involved in the advocacy and awareness of this project. They also actively take part in the project, whereby the organization has specific races and marathons that are designed for the youth with epilepsy and other disabilities, and prizes are awarded to them. The organization also provides the youth with epilepsy with the materials and gears they need when taking part in these projects. There is an illustration below. Next slide, Mr. Masugu. The Eswatini Epilepsy Organization also provides educational support to youth with epilepsy in mainstream education as means to promote inclusiveness. To rise to the call by the Ministry of Education to promote and introduce inclusive education in local primary schools, high schools, and university in the kingdom, the organization took it upon themselves to place some of the youth with epilepsy in local mainstream schools available in their community. This was a strategy to help promote more inclusiveness in schools and maximize the participation of all learners at all levels in the curriculum of educational institutions. We want to foster an environment that promotes youth with epilepsy being independent members of society and are able to thrive in the society. Next slide, Mr. Masugu. One other strategy used by the Eswatini Epilepsy Organization to promote inclusion is the Valentine's Day, which is what the organization is famous for. The youth with epilepsy are able to voice out the challenges they face, or challenges they can face, and the strategies to be put in place to help mitigate the challenges they face. Okay, at the dinner, the dinner also fosters an environment where youth with epilepsy can have open conversations on how they can help solve issues they face. Many issues surrounding stigma, many issues surrounding discrimination, many issues surrounding the employment gap, many issues surrounding the treatment gaps, to name a few. It also gives them an opportunity to engage with key stakeholders, mainly government officials and the business sector. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. To add on this, the organization also promotes inclusion of epilepsy in local schools. The organization does school visits to raise awareness on epilepsy. We teach young children about epilepsy first aid guide and encourage the students to be more kinder to one another. Next slide, Mr. Masugu. The organization also partners with local health science universities. This is one of the organization's new projects as means to promote more youth inclusion within the Faculty of Health Sciences, as they are the next pioneers in the healthcare system. We want to foster an environment where we groom the young future health practitioners to be more knowledgeable in epilepsy management, thus spearheading the measures that make epilepsy a health priority in Africa. The student health practitioners are involved in outreach programs to provide assistance to persons with epilepsy. And the organization is working tirelessly to ensure epilepsy is included in their curriculums. Next slide, please, Mr. Masugu. To add on that, we also partner with Shuguma Eswatini, which is under the Eswatini Sports and Recreation Council. EEO joins the health initiative as a means to promote physical fitness. This initiative encourages young people and old on the importance of physical exercise. It is a way of raising the awareness that even if you live with a certain disability, there is still an exercise you can do. It is a way of encouraging youth with epilepsy to take part in various sports and promote an environment that promotes inclusion and representation. Next slide, Mr. Masugu. Lastly, in a nutshell, inclusion matters. And when youth with epilepsy feel included, they are better able to contribute to the society without fear. We need to promote an environment that promotes all youth inclusion, as inclusion can assist in the fight against stigma and discrimination and also create awareness around epilepsy. We have reached the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Sengitile, for that presentation, for showing us how in Eswatini you include the youth in your programs and your operations. So we have about 30 minutes left. Maybe now I can open the floor to questions from our guests, so they can ask our panelists who share presentations any questions they may have. As we have already heard, like we've received the perspective from how the youth is affected at work, and then we just shared her personal story of how she dealt with epilepsy as a young person and how she's helping her son, overcome the epilepsy challenges growing up. And also we've now just heard Sangitile from Eswatini Epilepsy Organization sharing the strategies used by the organization to engage the youth, to put the youth in the forefront of addressing issues in the country. So if people can have questions or want to comment or share your story, you can also raise your hand, or you can type in the comment section. If you have a question for a specific individual, you are welcome to also ask the question or share ideas you may have. Thank you. Okay, I see a hand, Moses. You can unmute yourself, and you can ask or comment your question. Yes, Moses, I see your hand. You can ask your question or comment, make your comment.
Hello?
Yes, yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I have a question. Sorry, I was unable to unmute myself earlier, so I think I've just managed to do that. My question is something to do with, I think when the lady I found, when she was presenting, she said something like stigma can cause people with epilepsy to indulge themselves in bad behavior like drinking and many other things. But then she did not explain, I'm not sure if I just joined in late, but she did not explain maybe how they reach out to those that indulge themselves in such behaviors. What therapy do they offer to them? If she can clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. I think you can answer that one. How did you overcome the bad habits that we talked about earlier? Like, what mechanisms do you have in place as a Zambia association to help those young people with epilepsy? They've adopted certain lifestyles. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Indeed, when I was asking myself the questions, why me, and trying to fit in with society, I did not have the knowledge about epilepsy. And we in Zambia have an epilepsy association of Zambia, where I was fortunate enough to involve myself in the activities. And for me, the counseling that I received helped me to overcome these self-stigma issues where I had mentioned where I did not value myself, or in some instances you would hear my mother talking with other people to say she won't amount to anything. And even there was a time after I got married and had my second child, she was saying, I thought like the cornerstone, you became the cornerstone of the family when we thought that you were a non-entity. So all these things, we go through them, and I went through them. But having the counseling is very important. And this is one thing that, I don't know about the case in your country, but in our country, mental health issues are very undermined. So what I can say to help the youth is to join part of an association with people living with epilepsy. And with there, they'll be linked to professionals who will give them the counseling or psychological treatment. So I went through that treatment and was able to overcome, and I understood how to take my medication and what to avoid to consume. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's okay. Well explained. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also see another hand, Mr. Abraham. You can ask your question or make your comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Asogo. So thank you to all the presenters. This is really informing, inspiring, and really taking us somewhere to think more. We really appreciate this. I just have one question. I think it's directed to Frederick. I was listening, and I think I'm correct to say in your country, it looks like you have a very good legislative environment when it comes to protection and defense of persons with epilepsy, of course, and other disabilities, as you have articulated it. But I'm just interested in knowing, are there any programs that you have, apart from just having this good legislative, and policy environment, programs that you have for getting, into the business sector, getting into the infiltrating just, the work environment in the entire country, taking advantage of the legislative environment. If you do have those strategies and activities, what is the impact thereof, and what can we learn from that as other countries? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. One of the programs that I have seen working, which is specifically geared towards the special groups in which persons with epilepsy are also involved, is the emergency of what we call vocational training centers. Vocational training centers, basically, because of the same challenge of, people in special groups having the challenge of getting employment, say in mainstream companies or institutions, organizations. Now the government has embarked on empowering them so that they can get hands-on skills which they can initiate their own self-employment. So many people are having the notion of, getting what we call here the white collar jobs. And then we realize that we end up missing out on people who can do the simplest things as plumbing or masonry or carpentry or even being house managers and stuff like that. And these are, I think from the assessment, it was that so many opportunities are there in these small, what you might consider as very small jobs, but it is where opportunities are. So in Kenya, we have 47 counties, and in these 47 counties, each county, they passed a law that there should be at least 5 to 6 vocational training centers, and they take into consideration causes which can also be done, or professions that can also be done with persons with disability, and of course inclusive of that of persons with epilepsy. So in one way or another, I have seen this really working, because once you have finished that course, and most of them are short courses, 3 months, 6 months at most, or 1 year, when you come out, you are equipped enough to start your own venture in what you have actually been able to study. And upon that program of just training, when you come out, say maybe you have gone and studied to be a beautician, you apply to be given a fund to buy equipment that can help you to start that business or that venture that you have studied for in that vocational training. At least I can cite out that one as one of the implementation through the laws that have been enacted.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred, for that answer. And then I see the people comments saying that they should share the slides and the presentation. We will share the video and the presentation, the recording will be shared. If I haven't sent you anything by Friday, maybe you can just send me an email and I will share with you the link or the presentations as well. So if there are any other questions, we still have a few minutes left. If there's another question or comment, welcome at this moment. Thank you. Okay. I think maybe we will end it here for today. And thank you once again. Thank you for joining us. And before I end this conversation, maybe I will give Reverend Fred, Jesse, and Sengetide to make our last few comments. I'll give them a minute each to summarize what they talked about, and then we can end the discussion for today. Thank you very much. Over to you, Reverend Fred.
Thank you so much, Buto, and thank you everyone for joining today's conversation. I don't think I have much, but in our own little and small capacities from the organizations that we are representing, I feel that we have an opportunity to voice out on suggesting policies that our governments can enact and take into place, but more so even when these suggestions have been taken and maybe we have pushed for them to be made policies and laws, we should not just sit back and say we pushed to this extent. We must go a little bit step ahead in trying to make sure that we are seeing the implementation of the same that we have suggested also working out on the ground. Otherwise, because we are also representing organizations that, once in a while get opportunities to do programs and projects here and there, let's make it a priority for ourselves when we get such opportunities to give chances to the youth with epilepsy to work with us, even if it is a contract for 3 months, for 2 months, for 1 month, even if it is a program for 1 week. But at the end of the day, there will be at least an income that this youth can get. We should be in the forefront of giving and offering such opportunities to the youth living with epilepsy, so that at the end of the day, they also feel that even our own organizations and institutions are recognizing us. And finally, let me just say, in the capacity of, raising awareness as an epilepsy activist here in Kenya, I will be running a marathon in November, the Bmw Dallas Marathon, to create awareness for epilepsy for our continent here in Africa. Every 2 years, I do an expedition, and the first expedition was in 2018, where I walked from Nairobi city to Mombasa, which is a coastal city, about 482 kilometers, which took me about 12 days to create awareness. 2020, I cycled again from Nairobi to Arusha in Tanzania in 3 days, and then rested for 2 days and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in 7 days. So this year, I'm practicing for my first marathon, which will be in Dallas, Texas. And next week, I'll be doing my 3rd trial for qualifications in Kigali, Rwanda, for the International Peace Marathon in Kigali. So I need your prayers as well, even as we continue to emphasize on the message of awareness. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mbuto.
Thank you, Fred, and we commend the work you've been doing for epilepsy. We've seen you climb Mount Kilimanjaro, biking, cycling, and all the other activities that you've done. And thank you. May you continue to do it, and encourage and hopefully influence and encourage others to do it as well, so that we take epilepsy awareness to the new heights. Over to you, Jesse. Any last few words that you might want to say?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story. For me, I think the key message that I can give to the youth is that don't feel like you live in isolation. self-stigmatization starts with you assuming what other people think. You never know. It's just that people may not know how to treat you. So give them that information. Secondly, and importantly, is know who you associate with. Aside from your family, choose, select friends who will add value to your life. Friends who know when you are unwell and they'll understand. Declare to your employers when you're about your ailment prior to starting work and what they need to do. Most importantly, know your auras. If you're not feeling well, you're feeling funny, don't go anywhere. Send out a message to someone. With this in place, you live, for me, I live what they call a normal life. I don't even know what that means, but I work, I swim, I do horse riding with my children, and it hasn't limited me at all. I went to college away from home. So as a youth, don't see epilepsy as a barrier. Dream and dream big. Epilepsy will help you achieve greater goals. And in fact, the fact that I have been living with epilepsy has helped me to internalize and know myself even more deeply. I critically analyzed things and I was able to excel. Before the age of 30, I reached the position of Chief Operations Officer of the biggest microfinance institution in Zambia. This alongside with epilepsy, it didn't stop me, and nothing can stop you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse, for the very encouraging words and bringing the element of self-stigma that our young people inflict on themselves. And I hope the words other members, they'll share them, and other members will also understand, and then also talk about self-stigma. As we know, that epilepsy is more than just seizures. It's other conditions, depression, stress, and many other various factors that may affect people. I see a hand from Leslie. Before I hand over to Sangatidis for a few words, I was wondering if you have a comment or you wanted to ask a question. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me as well to all of your webinars. It's very interesting. It brings back a lot of memories for me from living in Zimbabwe and in South Africa for over 60 years. Going through the youth side of it, a lot of recruitment agencies also are very, very limited. And when you've got epilepsy, if you try and bring it up in conversation, they immediately turn their back on you and basically don't want to interview you. And I found this several years ago. And it's very interesting to see what's happening in Kenya, Zambia, and Eswatini. And I'm happy to share any information for anybody through Facebook, because my passion is to do epilepsy awareness, and I'm an advocate, and I'm happy to help any of you share any information you want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Donley. And I know that you are good at editing. You produce newsletters and all the likes, and you've been sharing information for us, and we'll be sharing with members what you have shared with me, and I'll be sharing with the rest of the members. Thank you very much for.
If anybody wants any editing done, I'm happy to help as well. I do it voluntary, so I'm happy to help anybody if they need editing done. Kenya, yes. Anybody? Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for availing your services. And maybe Sangatile, you can also say your last few words, and then we can end this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Masugu, and everyone for giving me an opportunity as a young person to speak on the importance of inclusion. I would like to say this, that I wish everybody can apply the social model view of disability, which entails that oh, sorry guys, so very, very sorry. I'm distracted by something. Sorry. I would like to encourage each and every one of you to apply the social model view of disability, which does not deny the impact of an individual's impairment, but it seeks to put responsibility on society to accommodate persons with epilepsy rather than expecting persons with epilepsy to accommodate themselves. Let us foster an environment that accommodates persons with epilepsy. Let us foster an environment that promotes inclusion. Let us foster an environment that promotes representation. I will say this in the words of Zozibini Tunzi: let us foster an environment where we encourage youth in general and youth with epilepsy to take up space and cement yourself in society, because nothing in this world is important like taking up space and cementing yourself and creating a name for yourself in the society. So in ending, I would just like to say thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sengetile, and that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you will be joining us again. There's another webinar on Saturday. We'll be discussing, as we are expecting the World Health Assembly next week, so there'll be a webinar on Saturday hosted by the International League Against Epilepsy and the International Bureau for Epilepsy. We will be discussing that in anticipation of the adoption or support of the Intersectoral Global Action Plan. What can we do, as we don't want this document to be just another paper that we put in the shelves and keep it. So you can also join that webinar on Saturday. I will share the poster and how you register, so that we also voice out our issues as Africans as well, so that they can all understand what we need and how we best think we can work on the Intersectoral Global Action Plan. Well, with that said, I will share the PPTs, the slides, and if I haven't sent it to you by Friday, you can also email me, masugumbutu@gmail.com, and I'll be sharing the link to the recording. So the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and it will be on our website and other platforms as well. So thank you for joining us, and looking forward to the next webinar and the webinars to come, as this is a monthly exercise for IBE Africa. Thank you very much, and have a great day from where you are. Thank you.